Hey everybody, welcome back to Worship Perspectives. My name is Rob, this is Jameson. We're here really to talk about one of the subjects that's most near and dear to my heart personally, which is guitars. I love the guitars. Jameson, very, very good guitar player, years and years of experience. We both play other instruments, but this is my main instrument right here.
Mine as well, as far as leading worship. My native instrument is the drums. This is where it began, but I play the guitar more than any other instrument, and it's also my favorite instrument to play and to talk about, which is what we're going to do today.
And we've got two parts to this episode, really. The first part's going to be addressed to more the beginner guitar player. The second part of the episode is going to be addressed more to people who have been playing guitar for a while, but say maybe just got invited to go play with their church's worship team. Different things that worship music brings out of guitars that most other genres don't. And there's things in worship guitar that's just more important than it would be in another type of music. Not to say that the guitars aren't really, any guitar that you pick up can P-dub.
That's right. That's what we want to focus on. Besides, we're going to talk about the guitar as an instrument first and some of the other accessories. We want to make sure you know if you're looking for some advice on playing at church, whether you are a new player or a seasoned player. That's what we're going to talk about a little later and kind of tell you what you need, the ABCs of what to bring with you, what to expect. And then we can dive deeper into the electric guitar world, which is a lot of patches and tones and setups, which requires a lot. Requires that kind of stuff is previous to you need to even do that previous to rehearsal. You need to have all that fixed as much as possible.
Absolutely. So Jameson, why don't we start off? Why don't you tell us about this gorgeous Gibson you've got right here?
All right. Well, this is a J45, but most importantly, this is just a drop net acoustic guitar, which is the most common type of acoustical guitar. They're all about the same size of their box. Some have, the numbers reflect the size of this body and the shape of these shoulders and the shape of these hips. But if your guitar does not plug in, like this guitar has a pickup that I had installed with a preamp here, that's not a dead end. You can still be used. There's other ways around that, or you can grow into that. There's many styles of acoustic guitars. You see there's a 3/4 one, it may be out of frame, but they come in all different sizes. I always tell people guitars are like tennis shoes and blue jeans. You really need to try out several before you land on one because they're all different. But acoustic guitar is a big major part of contemporary worship. Likely the worship leader will play the acoustic guitar if they're not playing keys. And then you usually have at least one acoustic player, maybe two, and then one or two electric players in most setups. The acoustic guitar, well, let's stick with just the guitar. We'll talk about church in a second. Yeah. And Rob, you tell me about what you've got there.
All right, what I have right here, this is a Gibson Les Paul copy that a dear friend of mine had put some new pickups in, and this is my favorite guitar right here. This is my workhorse. This is the one that I bring with me no matter what I'm doing every single Sunday. If I'm not playing it for every song, it's at least with me. The pickups that are in it are bare knuckle Rebel Yells. They're very, very good. A medium output pickup, and for praise and worship, a medium output pickup is really what most people look for. They don't get crazy amounts of distortion on them, and they're not very noisy. So the pickups on this one, they're just really sharp and really clear. They have a real clarity to them. But this is a solid body guitar. It's got a maple cap. I mean, this thing is a tone monster. If you want to hear some of the tones that I can get from it real quick, I mean, this does some ambient tones to it, like I was doing in that little intro where you just kind of volume swell into it. I can kick on a drive, gets a little bit dirtier, but if I want some real gain, real distortion, I just kick on some distortion and it'll really crunch. Jameson, tell us about this gorgeous Fender you've got
well,
here.
This is my first one I grabbed. This is a 2010 American-made Telecaster, ash body. And maple neck, and this guitar's never needed any kind of adjustments. I just change the strings, wipe it down, and go. But there are lots of these are our personal favorite guitars that we brought with us. There's lots of different guitars. You could have a $99 Squire out of the pawn store, or you could inherited your grandpa's guitar that's worth as much as my truck. What really matters is, does the instrument work? Does it work properly? Does it have any crackles in it? when you plug it in. All those things you need to address. You know, if you're looking to buy an instrument, the things to look for. Let's tell them some things to look for. The first thing I always look at when I'm looking at a new instrument is I want to look and see if the neck is straight, if it's been warped or bowed. Because if it's just leaning in or out, that's adjustable. But if it's twisted or it's got too deep of a bow, you might want to pass on it. You want to look right here where if it attaches like this does, you want to look right here and see if there's been any kind of fractures or cracks, because that's where they'll appear first. Even in a solid body, I don't know if we have a through neck. Is that
my Les Paul's a neck through.
The neck through has the right here is where you want to look. Is where the neck attaches to this part of the body. That's the stress point where the body will crack. You could check where anything's been screwed in, like strap pins, anywhere there's screws. You know, check for stress and cracks. And sometimes it doesn't matter, you know, it's just aesthetic. But that's the things I look for. Cracks are, no bueno on a guitar.
And this particular guitar here has it's got single coil pickups versus like my Les Paul has humbucker pickups, which means they cancel the hum. They're a lot clearer pickups. The single coils tend to be a lot brighter. Yeah. They also tend to be a lot noisier.
All right, let me give us an example of that. I don't know if you can hear that. That's not horrible, but it gets worse. You could go, there's some settings where you have to move your selector off of that pickup during a quiet time or between songs.
And then a perfect example of what Jameson was talking about getting a cheap instrument. This started out its life as a Squier Affinity Strat. This is probably a $200-300 guitar tops. Now this particular model has been reworked by my luthier, and he put all kinds of craziness into it. And this is actually my son's guitar. I'm borrowing it from him because that was my Christmas present to him, was to get all this work done to it and turn this thing into an absolute monster. But this guitar, this is a Stratocaster. It's a lot like a Telecaster single coil pickups, but it's got 3 pickups and a 5-way selector switch, which means you can blend 2 pickups together, which almost gives it like a humbucker effect where it'll cancel out the hum.
Why don't you kind of show them with the selectors, like which one's doing which one, and maybe the knobs, what they're doing?
For example, yeah, Strat. Absolutely. So for example, like this selector switch right here, what this does is it tells me which pickup I'm using. In the top position, it uses the bridge pick or the neck pickup. If I move it down, it uses both the bridge or the neck pickup and the center pickup. Then it's just the center, got the center and the bridge, and then just the bridge. And you can hear the difference in the tone. And all that is because it's picking up vibrations from different parts of the strings, which have a different tone to them. So it can chime, it can get down and dirty and really get some grit to it.
Right, and these pickups are adjustable. You can, well, don't do this if you don't know how, but they will actually raise up closer to the strings for a different sound. If it's too much, you can lower them. Sometimes I've played guitars that were so close I couldn't properly play with my pick because it was so close, especially on like a 3 pickup Les Paul. The Tele and lots of other guitars that have only 2 pickups or a single pickup. If I had a single pickup, it would not have a selector unless it was like a John 5 kind of mute guy, that kind of thing. But this guitar, straight up and down, it has 3-way switch. So straight up and down are both pickups. This is my tone, which is bass, treble, tone, volume. That's my neck pickup, which is more for rhythm work. And then my bridge pickup, which is more for pretty simple.
There's a lot of spank in the tone of these Telecasters and Stratocasters. There's a lot of chimey sparkle, if you will. That's really the only way I know to describe it.
Well, tone is the rabbit hole we could go down and talk about for the rest of our lives and not run out of things to talk about. But let's switch over to maybe talking about how we could take these instruments and this stuff and take them into the church and be in our worship band. Let's back up if you don't mind. Well, actually, Rob, you want to take us through your pedal board, and then I can run through an acoustic setup after that.
Absolutely. So what I've got here, what I'm playing through, this is my Line 6 Podgo. It's an amp modeler. So what it does is it basically takes it takes and creates a digital copy of everything that your normal amplifier would do. So instead of running this into an amp, I just run this into the front of house mix sound console, and I get all of my amp tones, all of my effects, and it doesn't even have to come out on a speaker on stage, so that you get what's called a quiet stage. That's really important, especially if you want to remain friends with your sound tech. Having a quiet stage is like the best way that you can throw up a friendship flag.
Right.
Definitely help him out with his job. This particular pedal board, this was around $500, which when you really consider what you're getting out of it, it's really the budget option. And I've reviewed this on my channel on Budget Worship Leaders before. What I'm running through is an AC30 patch, which means it simulates a Vox AC30 right at the edge of breakup, which is where most of your tone comes from the modern praise and worship, is AC30 or perhaps a matchless or something like that with just on the edge of breakup, tube amp basically. And the greatest thing about the modeler is it does a really good job when you're playing with a tube amp and you want your tubes saturated. When you pick softly, it has a different effect than when you pick at it harder. When you pick at it harder, it drives the tubes a little harder, saturates them. So this is very good at copying that. And then I can put like a delay on it. I can put, I have an equalizer on this particular patch, a couple of overdrives, a delay, and one that just basically controls the decay, which is how long the sound goes. So really, it just allows me to sound like I've got a tube amp on the stage without having to have an amp. When you consider a Vox AC30 is about $600-700 just for a cheap one. Drive pedals are usually $100 to $200 a piece. Delays anywhere between $100 and $600 for a good delay. So all of that's built into this, and I have multiple different amps. So I've got thousands upon thousands of dollars worth of equipment right here in this $500 pedal board.
Yeah, that's right. Well, let me talk about, I said I was going to go to acoustic. I'm going to talk about this little amp I brought, which is not a tube amp, but it kind of does what Rob was talking about, except this one actually has a cabinet and a speaker. This is the Mustang GT100. I use this one exclusively at church for several years. I'm using a Boss Katana now, but I still have one of these at my church because this amp actually has a looping function. Before I go into that, what I like to do, Rob, instead of, I do not use a pedal board at church. I have before when I needed it, but what I have found is I have kind of 4 settings that I use. A clean sound that I can add reverb to, an overdrive sound that has good sustained distortion, a louder setting of that same sound for a lead, and then something that has some modulation on it like a delay or a chorus or a mixture of both. And this amp lets you choose through all that, as well it has live, has the knobs here so you can mix your sound live. And then it has the looper function for, you could use it to perform. I use it more for, rehearsal. If we're working on a part and it's like, this is the part that we need to learn. Now I don't have to play that over and over while I'm helping other people learn the part or find a different piece of it that they want to do, which is probably my favorite part of this particular amp. The cabinet on this amp will shut completely off. I'm going to flip this around real quick just so we can see that it has stereo outputs, both balanced and unbalanced. I don't know if you can see that, Matt, but if you have a line out, whether a 1/4 inch or an XLR, you can turn the cabinet all the way off, and the signal still remains into your sound system. Which eliminates all of your stage volume, which basically makes it similar to what Rob's using, except I still have the cabinet if I needed it or wanted a little more there. The reason we don't use tube amps so much in worship is, let's go back to what Rob was talking about with the tone. You ever listen to a song and it just sounded 8 times better when it was turned up? Well, that's what tube amps are. They sound best when they're loud, and they really, once you get below a certain threshold with the volume knob, it loses why you want to use it. It becomes kind of a muffled, hand over mouth kind of sound if it's not bright and clear. Whereas is the problem because they're loud. So they either need to be baffled, which is you can baffle an amp several ways. I've just had a singular board baffle before, and you just lay it kind of like a TP between the mic and the speaker. Baffle boxes, or it's kind of like a drum room. It's plexiglass that goes all the way over the amp and the microphone. And then tone rooms, amp rooms, is just have the amp off stage in a isolated area, but that requires extra personnel.
And that's the same thing as when we were talking about our traditional worship primer. We went up into the tone room of the sanctuary. Well, the same thing applies when you have an isolation room, which is where you have your amps cranked all the way up to 11 and nobody hears it because it's in a soundproofed room. It still gets fed back through the front of house through most of your churches that have that kind of a setup use in-ear monitors, so you don't have to have a speaker monitoring what you're playing. And then I've got the main reason I brought this, and this is my semi-hollow body. This one makes all the difference of how you have it run. This guitar can sound absolutely amazing, or it can sound absolutely terrible and feedback constantly. The main difference being, if I'm playing this through a modeler running through front of house, it sounds crisp, it sounds clear, it sounds gorgeous. If I'm playing this on an amplifier and the amplifier is pointed anywhere close to it and it's turned up in even the least little bit, this thing will feed back so fast it'll make your head spin. And the feedback, I mean, it's just a screaming, squealing feedback that we don't even want to try that here just for demonstration purposes because it's that bad. This one I'm only allowed to play. Matt only allows me to play this if I'm running straight into front of house.
Well, acoustic guitars will also create feedback if it's just dependent on how you're set up, your stage setup. If you have wedges, there's things you can do to fix that. If you do have a feedback problem with your guitar, there's an insert you can put in your guitar, you can EQ it out. But let's talk about plugging in an acoustic guitar into a PA for worship. If you've never done this before, if you're either a new guitarist or you've never played at church, here's what you want to bring with you. You want to make sure you have an instrument cable and a guitar stand, because most places aren't going to provide, they'll go find you one, but it's better just to have your own equipment, your own gear. And then the next thing I always recommend to someone is, this is not a pedal tuner, but it looks like one. I couldn't find the one I wanted to bring. But either a pedal tuner or a volume pedal, just so you can kill your signal to the board, because if you need to unplug, or just I've got a couple of acoustic guitars that do not have a preamp in here, so they don't have a volume knob. It's just on. You plug it in, it's on. You unplug it, it's off. Mm-hmm. So in that case, you need to be able to mute your instrument for when you sit it down. The next thing that I would recommend is using, instead of, Rob, can you reach the regular DI right there? So what an acoustic guitar would plug into is something similar to this, a direct input box, which changes your unbalanced signal into a balanced signal. If you can step up from it, now this is totally fine. You can plug into that and play forever. But you want to separate yourself, this cable from that cable, with a tuner or a volume pedal. Next, you could go to an acoustic DI, which will have some EQ settings. So if you're a beginner, you're probably okay with just going into the DI with your tuner. If you care a lot about your tone and the way it sounds, then you want to have some control. You don't want to have to ask the sound guy to turn your treble up a little bit, scoop the mids, whatever you would want to do to get your tone right. This is one I used for several years. I use a Fishman, but this also has a mute. Like all this pedal does right here is mute the signal, which is, very important. And then this has where you could have a gain, you could have a dirtier sound, treble, mid, bass, frequency, and then this has a sonic maximizer that I never really used, but you can notch out a different tone, or you can use that to fight feedback.
I grew up with a sonic maximizer in the studio. The things are amazing.
Yeah, they are if used properly. What I've used them most effectively for is for dialing back some feedback. Mm-hmm. Like if you've got a certain frequency that keeps, like, sometimes you'll hit a certain note, G or F sharp, and wow, and that has to be EQ'd out of the mix, whether from here or at the soundboard.
All right, we're back after just a little bit of minor technical difficulty. So, Jameson, you were talking about the DI box.
Yeah, well, we wanted to, I was saying how you would want to have something in between your instrument and the DI to kill your signal. And Matt pointed, and the other reason is that if you don't want to have to try to get the sound person to mute you and unmute you, and then, that's just an extra step you don't want to have to try to take, especially during worship. But if you do not have a tuner, pedal, and by the way, you could get a tuner pedal for $20 on Amazon. I just ordered one for someone. You can unplug the instrument from the DI first. We showed you the DI earlier, the black box. So if you unplug your instrument cable from there first, it will not pop, and therefore the end of the cable will not be live. So just wanted to throw that tip in there.
So now that we talked about that, I wanted to get into something a little bit more advanced, and this is just kind of tips and tricks for the guitar players that have maybe been playing for a while, that are just interested in joining their church's worship team or have been invited to. Because playing worship guitar is a lot different than any other genre, mainly because most genres of music, it all plays to the song, but your individual creativity and all that really comes into play a lot more. Whereas with praise and worship, it's not about us. None of this is about us. It's all about worshiping Jesus, and it's about getting everybody in the congregation together to worship Jesus. And that's what makes the guitar a little bit different. When it comes to praise and worship, and this is something that I kind of alluded to earlier in the episode, but when it comes to praise and worship music, most of your instruments are playing kind of not to be noticed. And the electric guitar, mainly the lead guitar, is one of the very few exceptions to where its sole purpose is building emotion. And that's something that it's very different than any other instrument. And that's the case in your regular, your rock music or anything like that. Your music in general, your lead guitar is an emotional instrument. Whereas in praise and worship, it's kind of really the only real emotional instrument.
Well, an organ can be used that way, in different types of worship. But you're right, Rob. And also the difference, like in between, like singing a hymn or singing out of a hymn book or even a choir piece and contemporary worship, is it's going to have these spaces that are meant to be a worshipful space, and that space is usually covered by a lead guitar part or an instrumental part at the very least. And then, matter of fact, I was just talking to a group the other night about a lot of the modern worship songs are meant to listen the first time and then sing along the second time. If you think of how many songs, I could sit here and name 20 without even thinking about it, where a lead singer is going to sing it all the way through, and then it's going to turn around and you're going to sing the exact same thing again, except this time everyone sings. And it's an easy way to kind of learn a song. But there again, there are moments in music and worship and through music where you shouldn't sing. It's a time to be worshipful, to be thoughtful, to be in prayer, and not be reading the words, because that's what a lot of people do. They get lost in the reading of the lyric.
And that's why worship songs usually your typical contemporary worship songs, usually they have a bunch of bridges in them that just repeat the same thing over and over again. Not because it's not creative, but because it's really emphasizing the message that's in that bridge.
Right, and making it easier to know. That's part of teaching songs to congregations is not having complex songs that no one's ever going to be able to keep up with what's going on. It's having something that's repetitive. I had a former member at a former church call them 7-11 songs, who sing the same 7 songs 11 times in a row.
Was that Kim?
No.
I've heard him say that.
But we had done the song, it just left me. It was the John Egan song, Set a Fire. You know that song? And so it's got like 8 words.
And then there's the joke about, this is a example of a modern praise and worship song. This is an example of a modern praise and worship song. This is an example, and you get all the jokes like that. But it really has.
I'm a modern worship writer.
But it does really serve a purpose. And one of the things that you'll notice, especially like in my church when we're coming from doing strictly hymns to doing hymns and praise and worship songs, is that my team was having a little bit of a hard time adapting to the fact that you're not singing constantly like you are in a hymn.
Right.
And that's a huge difference, is not singing constantly throughout the whole song.
It is. All right, well, let's talk about questions you may have if you're thinking about or if you've been asked to join the worship team. Preparedness. You need to find out what that worship leader or the church is going to provide you, because especially with the electric guitar, chances are you're not going to be given the tab. You're not going to be given the link to download a patch. You're going to have to be industrious, and you're going to have to pre-plan and figure that out outside of rehearsal, because the other thing you don't want to do is spend 15 minutes of your rehearsal waiting on the electric guitar player to fix their patch, or the keyboard player, as that goes. And sometimes you have to fix things. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but you have to, most of the time, on the electric for sure, you have to, on your own, go find a video. If you don't have the ability to pick things out with your ears and figure it out, then there's likely to be a tutorial on it on YouTube. With an acoustic guitar, you really, you need, like I said before, you need a guitar stand, you need an instrument cable, a tuner, and capo, But also find out from that worship leader, hey, are you going to give me, if the song's in A flat, are you going to give me a G copy for capo? Because they may also want you to do that research and find that yourself. Me personally, I try to provide everything, including tab, if it's needed. But I'm kind of a different bird, because I'm a worship pastor and a music teacher, so it's not it's no big deal for me to sit down and write tab out.
But the prepared stuff, we're going to cover that in our next episode, which is actually all about being prepared. But as far as preparation for electric guitar, or for lead guitar, or for anything like that, the other thing I wanted to talk about was making sure that you have separation. And what I mean by separation is if you have two guitars that are too similar, and you're playing them at the same time as another guitar player, it's going to be really hard to pick out which is which. That's why, if I'm going somewhere and I'm leading worship, or I'm part of the worship team, and say I have another guitar player there who's playing a Fender with single coil pickups, I like to bring either my SG or my Les Paul or this guitar, so that the humbucker pickups are kind of offset the chiminess of the single coil pickup, so it has a warmer tone to it, and then that allows also the sound tech to separate the sound a lot more on the soundboard, so that you have clear distinction between which guitar is doing what. And that keeps things from getting too muddy.
Right. And hopefully the worship leader, the music director would have some direction on that. And I call that voicing. If I've had as many as 5 guitars in a worship band, and you all have to have a different voice for the most part. You might can have 2 acoustics on the same part. But, on the acoustic guitar, or on any guitar, you have, your open voicings. Like there's a G, a G, a G. There's 4 places before the 12th fret where you could play a full G major chord. And then you've got the capo, which you could use to put the song in a different pitch altogether, which is the easiest thing to do with acoustic guitars. With the electric guitar, I call them high chords. Typically the electric guitar never needs to be doing this. Never should be relied on for, well, not the electric guitar in general, but the lead guitar shouldn't be relied on for rhythm work, and shouldn't hardly ever be doing any major strumming on the low end, in situations where there's an acoustic guitar, that is.
Right.
If you're the only guitar, you have to do all that. But that just comes from voicing. Electric players want to play their chords up here, instead of would go the same chords, different voice. There again, that's not something that goes. It would be in a musician and playing with other people anywhere, not just church. A good worship leader or music director should be able to help you through that. Even worship leaders who don't play guitar typically would be proficient on the keyboard enough to help you transpose your part. They may not be able to show you how to play the chord, but they could say, hey, if you go up 5 steps, you can play the same thing in C.
So anyway, we just wanted to give just a quick overview on guitars, a little bit of tips, a little bit of tricks, and personally, I just like any excuse to bring out my guitars. I love playing. That's where my heart's at, and I love playing for worship teams. So Jameson, he is open, being a music teacher, he's opened my eyes to a lot of different things. That's within the last, just while we were getting set up for here, he's just one of those guys who can really teach, and he's just born for it. So I just wanted to first off thank you for all the help that you give me on this, and
my pleasure.
And I absolutely love playing with my groups and playing with my teams and playing with Jameson. It's absolutely just a blessing. So if you've got any questions, feel free to just drop a comment or leave a comment on the live, or not on the live stream, but on the YouTube. Hit us up on Facebook if you've got any questions. If you've got anything that you want us to cover, hit us up. Let us know. We'd be glad to do a special episode just for whatever it is that you need.
Absolutely. Or if you have questions about this episode, we'd love to respond to that and try to answer your question and even give you some advice. Rob will even tab out your parts for you.
Rob doesn't read music, so Rob's not the right one for that. But
the main thing is get involved. If you have an opportunity to get involved, you won't regret it. You're going to be nervous at first, especially if you're either a beginner or you don't play out. But once you start doing it, especially if you do it for the Lord, you're going to get an overwhelming sense of, kind of pride in yourself for doing it. A sense of accomplishment, a satisfaction of, hey, I'm serving my church. And it will make you grow. You won't have to try to grow. You will grow as a musician playing, handfuls of songs every week and having to rehearse for that. There's no way out of not growing as a musician by doing that.
Absolutely. So if you've got any questions, comments, let us know. We'd be glad to help you. We're going to go get set up for another episode. Y'all have a blessed evening. We sure do appreciate y'all.
God bless.